Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
And welcome to another episode of How Leaders Behave. My name is Mark Hoare and my colleague Peter Agnew joins me as always. Real pleasure to have you with us. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about unpacking and understanding your 363. So if you've completed it and you want to understand how to actually make this product work and sing for you, that's what we're going to take you through today. So Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So really a three-step process in this one. We've got the 363 for Leaders report, Wiley product, and we've got our 360 report. So in this episode, we'll just walk through how to unpack this report. I think as coaches, we sort of find ourselves as glorified page turners in some ways, don't we? Where we're sort of moving back and forward through the report. So in this episode, we sort of take ourselves through methodically, what do the charts mean, how to read it, and how to unpack the report. How to get the best out of the report is probably the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So obviously you completed your report. That's what the Wiley 363 product looks like, and it's a 360. And the reason it has the 3 at the end is because the product actually gives you 3 strategies for development that are the bits that your raters actually said, this is what we want you to focus on. So not necessarily your lowest scores.
No, they're going to be part of the leadership request section and an aggregate of some of those scores. So yeah, I think as leaders, we want to try and figure out where we put our energy. Development-wise, we've probably got lots of different priorities about how we can develop ourselves. This reporter will come out with the top 3.
And the whole premise of the report is to learn from where we are, so that we can become, a much more rounded leader, rather than leading out of our single dimension. Is actually learning how to become far more rounded.
Yeah.
So
let's have a first look. Page 2, when we open the report, we see that we've got this page which has the cornerstone principles of the profile. So in the top blue shaded area, we've got some really key cornerstone principles of unpacking this profile. It talks a little bit about that your leadership style is varied, is influenced by a variety of styles. It also talks about this report also looks at the interpersonal aspects of the leadership style. So it isn't about whether you turn up on time and all of those bits and pieces. It's
how good you are at finances.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
And it mentions there that you don't have to be an expert in all of the 24 behaviours or the 8 dimensions, but a certain level of competency is going to be important. So the model that we use, the 8 dimensions, will be how do we break leadership down into its purest sense in some way? How do we provide leadership in a model that makes it accessible for us to understand?
And what's interesting, as we mentioned a number of times, is the Wiley product. This came into being in 2010. It took over 4 years in development, with over 300 senior leaders, met 150 organizations.
Lots of literature research and linking that back to these 24 behaviours. So it's sort of a simplistic model, but it's not simplistic in the way of the power of the model. It's easy to follow, but has great depth when it comes to leadership and management theory.
And one of the things we were saying in the last session as well, one of the things I find really helpful of this product is that it is not prescriptive. It doesn't say that your style doesn't work. It just simply says, this is what you're doing. Here's some things you could do to make it better. Whereas there are products out there that are very just critical of the way you're currently doing what you're doing, which might not be very helpful.
So the bottom section there talks a little bit about the 3-step process, and it will mention that understanding yourself and how others see you as a leader. It will explore the tendencies of the 8 approaches, and we'll learn from the 3 approaches or 3 strategies that we can get most out of the profile. So a good little page just to start off and have a read of. This is probably the engine room of the profile, Mark, your leadership outlook, and this really gives us the detailed text of the DISC profile.
So this narrative is driven by your own self-assessment piece. It's generated by the arc and the radius of where your dot falls on that DISC circumplex, and that narrative is driven specifically about your leadership style.
Yeah, so probably suggesting to the participant when they're opening the profile, have a really good read through this. You'll see that there's some tick, cross and question mark little bits and pieces we've got there. go through each paragraph, put a tick next to the paragraph that really describes you well. If you're not too sure, maybe put a question mark. And if you think, no, this paragraph isn't me, put a cross. So really personalize this section for you. Take out some of the comments that really describe you well, maybe underline a few of the statements as well.
So let's look at what I find the most attractive feature of this product, which is the model itself. And it is because it gives us a view of where we are. And much more importantly, it gives us a view of where we're not.
Yeah,
and it's where
definitely.
the focus needs to lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these 2 pages here, pages 4 and 5, really give us a good snapshot of the 8 approaches and their practices. So the model on the left-hand page will show us the circumplex in some ways.
Yeah.
What's interesting to note here is that behaviours that are adjacent to each other have a stronger correlation with each other.
Yeah.
The behaviours that are opposite, for instance, if you see the energising up at about 1 or 2 o'clock there, and we see the deliberate approach, which is almost the exact opposite of
Yes.
what an energising leader is.
Yeah.
So again, we're trying to figure out, well, how do we break leadership down? These 24 behaviours are the ways we do that, or the way the model does it in some ways. Yeah.
And so you've got there your first piece of exposure when you've looked at your own reports. You're now looking for the very first time when you get to page 5 so this is how your raters actually view you.
Yeah, so this is a really good snapshot of how others see you. And you've got the 7-point scale within this particular rating area. So your raters were asked to rate you in all of the leadership behaviours, and they were asked to rate on a 7-point scale. So within this diagram on page 5, you'll see the 7-point scale in the diagram, and this is just how your raters have actually seen you. What's really important on this page, though, is the definition of the 8 approaches. So if you're thinking, well, I can instantly see that I'm pretty high in the commanding leadership approach, while those words are self-explanatory, it's good to just jump in and say, well, what does a commanding leader look like? What does it sound like? And there's a little definition on the bottom of that page there. You might also look and say, well, I seem to be a little bit lower in the humble approach here. So what's a humble leader? And it talks there about maintaining a modest, composed demeanour and can be relied upon to make decisions fairly, as an example.
And on that particular image that we're showing on the screen there of this human being, whoever this sample is, you can see that the blue area on the top is covering the sixth out of 7 mark.
Yeah.
And the bottom, you're down to about 5.5. But
yeah.
that's anything above 5.5 is a trait that people still use regularly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They've
Under
got
5?
that in their behaviour.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we start moving down below that, we're sort of starting to say, well, we've got a bit of room for development right down into the 3 and 4 scales.
So if this was my score, if this was my view of what other people thought of me, yeah, that's a great score to start with. It means that you're using the 8 of the dimensions really well. You could use perhaps some of them a bit better, but that's a great starting point.
Yeah, and I think no matter what your shape looks like, it's a good opportunity to sort of say, okay, I can see where my energy as a leader fits, and here's some areas that I probably need to ramp up a little bit if I wanted to improve the effectiveness of my leadership.
So let's just have a look at the... I guess this is where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? When you first get a perception of your reality versus others.
We're still in the big picture here, so we're not drilling down into the detail, but what's added on page 6 is the self versus others rating. And the blue shaded area on page 6 is our own self rating. You'll see the dotted line that appears in this diagram, and you'll see that it's either going to be pretty spot on, where your rating is very similar to your rater's rating, or it might be a little bit larger. In this case, for this sample, the dotted line just extends a bit beyond the blue shaded area. So in a pioneering sense, the raters in this profile have rated the leader at around a 6, where the leader has rated themselves a 7. They see, I use pioneering behaviour a lot,
yes.
and their raters say, yeah, you use it a lot, but probably not as much as a 7. A whole lot of reasons why the rating could be like that, but it's a good one to start a conversation about. Why do you think the gap's there? What's
so for me, the bit that's on the right-hand side, energizing, affirming, and to some extent resolute and deliberate, his perception of himself fits the view that other people see. So his self-awareness is I think it's Taylor, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
Taylor.
self-awareness is actually very good.
Yeah, so how I see myself, how other people see me is part of it. If the line is on the inside of the blue shaded area, you don't see yourself as using the behaviour as much as others do.
Yeah.
A whole lot of reasons for that. You can unpack and start a discussion around that as well.
So interestingly, there are really three responses. My perception is the perception of others, those meet. My perception is that I use all these things all the time,
greater,
and people don't think I do, which is an interesting conversation. And then finally, I don't think I use them very much, but my raters think I use them a lot. Again,
definitely.
another interesting conversation.
But also pinpointing each one of the 8 behaviours, how they correlate with that. At the bottom of page 6 here, you'll also see a little bit about how your raters compare. So it gives you some little snippets there, the top 3 areas where your chart or your rating differs from your raters, and it'll tell you whether you overestimate or underestimate each one of those behaviours. So the example there on page 6 that it says you tend to see yourself as a little bit more humble than others do. For example, you may overestimate how fair-minded you are when making decisions, as an example. So 3 little snippets there. Again, you can sort of go through those and have a look at those comparisons in your ratings with the 8 dimensions.
So then moving on to the, you're starting to get now, again, a top line picture of what the individual groups of raters that you set up. You remember you've got the 4 groups effectively. You've got the manager, which can be 1 or more. You've got peers, which is everybody at your level within the organization. Direct reports, which is fairly obvious. And then others is everybody else that doesn't fit into that category.
It might have been your customers or suppliers or a committee or a group that you belong to. So,
or again, if you've not been in the organisation very long, it could be a couple of key guys that you worked with in the former organisation.
Yeah, definitely. So these are really important diagrams to look down. So you're breaking down the ratings by each group. You're having a look at your manager. How did your manager see you in some ways? And you're seeing how you rate against your manager. Peers, direct reports and others. I think a really good take home from this is the behaviour same? Does your manager see you the same as your direct reports? Do your peers see you the same? For example, someone may get a low rating in the peer category compared to their direct reports, and that's a really good conversation as well. And sometimes I'll get that little snippet that comes out and says, I've got to create a stronger relationship, or I've got to use my leadership when it comes to my peers. And sometimes people underestimate how important peers are, as an example, when it comes to their leader behaviour. So this is good to sort of say, well, where do you use your behaviour and how much do you use in each category?
And what's interesting are those 2 diagrams at the top there. You've got the manager and the peers. My observation would be that this individual is putting a lot more energy into the relationship with his manager than he is into the relationship with his peers, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly right. And probably even a little bit more in the deliberate behaviour with the manager compared to the direct reports. And that's a good conversation to have. You've obviously got that behaviour. You're using that deliberate behaviour with one of the categories. Is there any reason you're using it more with the manager than you are with the direct reports, as an example? So you know how to be deliberate. You know how to go through the detail and you know how to actually improve methods and all of those sorts of things that fit in within that particular category. But you may not be using it as much with your actual direct reports.
Because leadership is a role that's assumed. You can't say you're now the leader if someone doesn't want to be the leader. It's an assumed piece. So what's interesting in these 2 comparisons is that there could be a lot more that your peers could learn from your style if they saw you doing it a lot more than this guy particularly is.
And when we get into the areas like the detailed feedback, it might say something like acknowledging contributions, and a leader might see that that's really important to do with their staff, but all of a sudden they get a lower rating with their peers, and they'll sort of say, well, do I need to recognise and acknowledge my peers as well as my direct reports?
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Brin, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit brin.ai or search the App Store today.